The this when you talked about being incomprehensible, I just knew what you meant really, and it's like, so I've been reading this stuff for about 7 years or something like that, and most of the time it seemed incomprehensible, but it's been like digging for gold really. You have to prospect it, you have to sift through an awful lot of stuff, and I haven't been able to let it go. Because I thought there is some real gold in this. It's just such impenetrable stuff, and part of it's to do with the language. He's a philosopher. Heidegger is a philosopher, and so they use philosophical language. And unless you've tuned into that, there's sentences that simply don't make sense. And I guess it's like anything really. It takes time to get so that the language starts to become intelligible, really. So I've just kept going at it, and what Jenny was saying at the home, it's like I just haven't been able to let it go. It's been calling at me. So it is of all the stuff we've done, it's completely different, really. So my challenge has been to, and I kind of set myself a challenge at the end of the last workshop, and I said, we can do Heidegger. And I thought, where'd that come from? And I think partly it came from a sense of, the stuff that we do is interesting, but I'm not sure for you, but in some ways it's familiar ground. And also I thought there was a call really for some more substance in what we do. So this is substantial stuff. So my hope is that that I've managed to boil it down in a sense so that it's comprehensible, and also of course the challenge is that it's usable. This is about coaching and it's about psychology. So how does all this stuff pan out, so to speak, as me as prospecting? How does it pan out, and is there something that's really important? I know that it's decisively shifted my thinking. So that's part of this. I know that if I was to sort of draw my thinking, for years and years I've done, when I've talked about the coach and the client, or the coach and the outside world, I've drawn two circles. You've probably seen those circles a lot. When I do this now, I would wish to do something like a dotted line, a dotted circle sort of thing, and another dotted circle, which is something about openness and sharedness, so that we're not talking about separateness, we're talking about differentiation, if you like, within, or even something like two arcs, and a sense of things circulating, rather than two separate sort of encapsulated beings, or a person and the world. So I just can't help thinking now with this kind of map, if you like, rather than this kind of map. So hopefully this will, over the next 2 days, you'll get to a sense where this also makes sense to you, and see if it kind of enables a shift in your thinking. I've labelled this an existential phenomenological approach, and I'll be interested to know what you folks already make of those terms, because it will start to set the context. So maybe just in threes, just sort of for 10 minutes, what if anything do these words conjure up for you? Existentialism, existential and phenomenology. If you think back to Gestalt, there's a link there to Gestalt, because that was about phenomenology. So just get into threes and just see for a few minutes whether you've got initial connections with this. Again. Turn it off there. Yeah, well, I was thinking of turning it off anyway, just for the Second. I don't think, probably not. I'll just have it there just in case. Oh, you mean about the existentialism? No, I just think it's discussion. Okay then. So, are these terms that have some meaning? And existentialism to start with?
Is it about your sense of being in the world, your sense of belonging, your way you interact with the world?
It's in that territory. Heidegger's, one of his key expressions is being in the world.
Right.
I think, so it's in that territory, yeah? Yeah.
It's also the thing that there are no fixed absolutes, so everything is kind of just is.
Right.
So there's no right or wrong in the absolute sense, there's no good or bad in the absolute sense. There's no absolute to make any sense of those things.
Yes. And have you got a grasp of why that would be the case? Why there'd be no absolutes? What's the thinking behind that?
When I heard those things, people like Nietzsche, so his idea that if in Western society people traditionally associate absolutes with the existence of God, so God is the absolute, he measures everything against in terms of his values. And if you don't believe in God in the way that Nietzsche was seeing society map with God, then the necessary conclusion of that is that then everything's kind of relative. There's nothing to compare anything to decide what's right or wrong about that.
Yep. And so the challenge of that is what, do you think? If there are no absolutes, what challenges does that pose to people?
No boundaries.
Say again?
No boundaries.
No boundaries, in a sense no groundedness.
Yeah.
No purpose.
No purpose. That's right. They were a miserable bunch. The existentialists. In a way, because the whole sense of existentialism is about the givens of our existence, and which isn't anything to do with pathology or anything like that. It's to do with what it's like to be human. And so it's things like we're all going to die, and that is ever present. And how do we deal with that? You don't really get much of this in the psychotherapies about this, unless you're an existentialist. They, taking up your point, there's a sense of the world is intrinsically meaningless, unless. So we have to give it meaning. There's the stuff about freedom and choice that in some forms of existentialism, more than others, it's a broad church, as we'll see, but they say, well, we're free and you have to choose, and if you choose one thing you can't do another. So it's coming to terms with that kind of stuff. In other words, we actually create our own lives, and they say that is in some sense terrifying. In one of the podcasts that Dreyfus does on Heidegger, he was talking about the sense of groundlessness of existence, and he said one person who really got it, they rushed out of the room and threw up. He said that was real existential anxiety. He said, because if you really get that sense, then it's terrifying in a way. So this is the territory of existentialism. That sense of what is it to be human, and what is it to be human? What are the givens of existence? And it was developed by a bunch of philosophers who weren't looking for what they would see as the comforts of various world systems like faiths or religious or political movements, which they often would see as a retreat away from this stuff. Okay, so Heidegger is in this tradition, although of course naturally he would deny it. But others would say that he uses the terms and he uses the terminology. And if you look in any textbook about existentialism, he's there as one of the key originators of this. It starts with people like Kierkegaard and stuff like that. What about phenomenology? Any sense of what that means?
I tend to think that it's being concerned with how we experience
Yes.
the world, subjective thing,
Yeah.
which would differ to try to make a rational, scientific observation or analysis of how things are, as if things don't exist in some objective way. So
That's
how
right.
do we perceive and experience things?
Yes. Yeah. So if you think of the Gestalt, which says it's phenomenological, it's about trying to describe experience rather than explain it. So in a phenomenological approach, you won't get things like you have in Freud, say, about its egos and stuff that's meant to explain, kind of give the causal background. It's more like how do I experience this? What meaning am I making in this? And so Heidegger's whole approach is phenomenological, and this is where you can check this out for yourself. Underneath all the vast verbiage and philosophical convoluted language, does this touch you? Is this meaningful to you? And I think that's the bit that's always got me, is I think it is. And it just needs someone to say it clearly. So that's the thing about phenomenology, and it's important for us when we get to the coaching part, is it's a phenomenological approach. So it's how do we help clients explore what is. And you can see we're in very similar territory now to Gestalt. In fact, there are similarities, and I'll kind of highlight them later on as similarities, but there is also significant differences to Gestalt, which I'll also kind of try to highlight. Okay, so that's the starting point. Let me start getting some of the...
Quick question.
Yeah, do this. Yes, this is. I was going to say along the way, sort of.
So would it be, when you said I find it meaningful, or words to that effect, so it has meaningful thing. So as we concept of a phenomenological approach, would it be I find this meaningful rather
Yes.
than it is meaningful, as if there's some kind of objective?
It would be something to me like, does this speak to me of my existence?
Yeah.
So it's almost like that's the touchstone of this. Is it getting something that? So it isn't so much. Does it make logical sense? Does it make rational sense? It's more like, in my experience, is this speaking to me? That kind of sense. Okay, so again, I kind of helped to root it in my own coming into this. So what brought me into this? First off was this existential theme. I read somewhere in a book that Heidegger said, in its very being, that being is an issue for it, and that just grabbed hold of me, because it basically means my being, who I am, matters to me. And I don't know about you folks, but that has always been the heart and present for me. It may be present, it may be more for me than for other folks, but it's been a curse really, that question. What's it all about? It's such a cliche, but damn it won't let go, and an answer won't come. Not one that's ever definitive. So that grabbed me. It's like, in terms of phenomenology, he's absolutely speaking straight at me. Do you recognise this? Is that there's a lot. There's some. Do you? Is it a question for yourselves? May not be, but it is for some. Certainly for me, anyway. It is what is the purpose, what is the meaning, what better for me, what am I going to make of my life? That's a more Heidegger way of putting it. What am I going to make of my life that it's meaningful?
When you put it like that, that's something that occurs to me lots and lots of the time.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think I said last time we had a coach practice, I feel like there's more to come. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
And it matters that there's more to come.
That's right. One of the things that Heidegger says, and we'll get into this more tomorrow, is something like potentiality is more, it isn't quite right, potential is more real than reality. In other words, who we are now is not all that we can be. And it's almost like our future calls to us. So there's powerful stuff in this statement. I also think there's powerful stuff in this statement for coaching, in terms of what is it that the people we are coaching, what is it that they're... Heidegger uses this notion of for the sake of which, and the highest level for sake of which, for the sake of which. You know, what for the sake of which are you doing this sort of thing? What's the ultimate, what's the end point, what's the real purpose? And so that was, that's kind of drew me in. And the second part was his sense of, when I was doing, the counselling, the psychotherapy, if you read that paper I sent around, I don't know if you all got it, about the relational approach. Well, when I was at Leeds Met, I basically wrote that stuff, and it's become the model that they use on the counselling diploma there, the relational approach, which is basically to say, sort of one person psychologist like Freud, that sort of ego and superego, where you're just looking inside the person for all the answers, isn't good enough. It just doesn't get it all, because we're social beings, if you like. So the relational approach was we become who we are through relationships, through the family that we have, and all that kind of stuff. The stuff that we've covered a lot, really, about infant and parent, and how they influence each other, and so on and so forth. And that felt like a big step and a powerful step. But for me, it never got. It's almost like the cause and the solution to people's difficulties was about these close personal relationships. It starts in the family, that's where the problems start, and actually it's the close personal relationship, or the therapeutic relationship, which is the cure, if you like. It's working through it, and the support and the transference and all that stuff. If you can bring all the difficulties and work it out in that space, but it felt like, and there's a lot of truth in that, but it felt not good enough. There's a whole bloody great world out there, and it never seemed to get hold of some of the stuff that's going on out there. And in that paper I gave, I think one of the things I said was about ADHD. There's ADHD is the big thing. This attention deficit hyperactive disorder, kids behaving badly because they can't sit and attend, and the behaviour problems, and the sense that it's been explained up to now, mostly in terms of chemical stuff in the brain, or genetic. Therefore, you take some medication, or the alternative is to do with parenting, and it's bad parents. They haven't set enough boundaries, and blah blah blah. But the point I was making there was actually really we seem to be in an attention deficit hyperactive disorder culture. When I was born, 1951, it was just black and white telly, 2 channels. I think there was 3 stations on the radio. No computers, no laptops, no Blackberries, and the culture now almost, selling things is how fast it is. Computers sell themselves on a nanosecond of speed. It's fast food. It seems like a whole culture that has now demands something now. So it felt like none of that kind of cultural stuff was even being addressed in all the stuff about the ADHD, about it's either a chemical thing or it's to do with bad parenting. There's this big world out there that seems to be the sort, what can be seen as a source. It wasn't getting it. So there was just a real frustration in me that this stuff, no one's getting hold of it. And so when I got this notion of Heidegger, he talked about that we're being in the world. That's our nature. We start from Pascal kind of got it in a way that custom is our nature. In other words, rather than looking in to find who we are cultural beings, and our nature is rooted in the culture. If you think of someone from another culture, you can immediately get it. You know, someone say from an Aboriginal culture, you would immediately understand how they are and how they go about things from seeing them in their culture. You have probably experienced it yourself, going into a different country. It takes time. Even different families, yes. Yes. So it was the coming together of these that made me think, yeah, there's a real shift here. There's real possibilities. And I think the creative tension in Heidegger is between this sense of we are cultural beings, and we'll go into that a bit more because he's basically saying who we are. You look out to see the culture. We are cultural beings, but also our existence is an issue for me. How can my life be an issue for me, and also me be a cultural being? Because in a sense, the cultural being is all about being socialised into certain ways of being, certain ways of seeing the world. But he's actually saying, how can I grasp my own life in that? Am I making sense here about the tension? And today we're going to be looking at the first half of this, if you like, about being in the world. And tomorrow we'll be looking at the existential side of it and the tension, hopefully a creative tension, that there exists, but like all tensions, it can go wrong, so to speak, and we'll see that again in Heidegger in a moment. Lots of furrowed brows. How are you getting on with this?
So is this almost a question in some way that you put them together that says we clearly do exist and we're social and cultural, but we don't know why.
Well, he's not seeking.
But for what purpose?
Well, he's not seeking to explain. He's seeking to give a phenomenological. So he's just saying, this is the way it is, without trying to, get into processes of socialisation or give underlying mechanisms for, we live in a capitalist society or anything. He's just saying, this is the way it is.
It's a beautiful paradox in that, in terms of the way that's presented is absolute, but what we're saying on the other hand is that it's all relative and all experiential. So that for me is why it's got this kind of sparky thing going, interesting.
Well, the thing about his writing, although it's obscure, he seeks to root it in everyday experience, and that's the crucial bit. It's like, does what he says catch for me a sense of what it's like? And I think mostly, when I can get hold of it properly, it does. And so I think this is the interesting challenge. The challenge is to understand it the first way, but then is he getting something here that speaks to me directly rather than theoretically? And
I was going to say, to follow that through then, we can all read the same paragraph written by Heidegger, and each will take something different from it, and it will have meaning or not, but each is in a different way, and that's just how it is.
I think he wants to make a stronger claim than that.
Yeah.
I think, and this is where it gets complex, well, one of the places, because one of the difficulties of Heidegger really sets going a whole, I'll explain a bit more in a minute, but he sets going a whole tradition in philosophy, in Western thought, where up to the time he was writing, people have basically mostly said there is something that we can call objectivity, which you can take subjectivity out of it. It's the real world, it's science. And his approach is we are always involved we are always involved in the activity that creates knowledge. So in a sense, there is always have a personal, a cultural element in this, and that is just the way it is. And therefore, there isn't the kind of objectivity that we would like there to be. And so, from that sense, there is that relativity. But I think he also wants to be saying that it's just not that because you need to check this out against what is, that what is doesn't just allow you to think anything. If you want to say there isn't a car coming, stand in front of it, and something's going to hit you. So I think he's saying that although we can only come at it from this phenomenological place where he comes at it, that there is a world out there that has enough pushback to make a difference.
Can I try to this is to bring into mind something that happened to me a few months ago that I think speaks to this. Can I take a punt and throw it out there to see if I'm getting it or not?
Okay.
So I was back in Ireland a few months ago, and a relative was telling me of another family who I know very well. One of whom is called Joe. They said that he was off work, and he was off work, and didn't explain why. And as it happens, we went around to see this family a few days later, and I was in the same room as Joe for 10 minutes when people were packing and whatnot. We were just in the same room, and it had been what I'd been told was by my relative was he's an issue with work. When you see him, don't talk about it. Don't start talking about all the things. And I thought something was strange at the time, and we didn't have time to discuss it. But so when I was with Joe, we talked about the children, we talked about holidays, and we talked about things other than maybe what else was going on. And it was only afterwards that I found out that Joe had stress problems with work and possibly mental health related issues relating to that. And I felt afterwards an incredible tension that I think in truth I had when I was speaking to him. But part of me wanted to say, how are you? And it felt as if my being wanted to say, how are you? But it felt as if there were other social forces around me that were saying, don't talk about mental health with somebody, maybe in Northern Ireland, where things, it felt as if there was people were just less open to talk about mental health issues. Is that
I think
where there was like a tension between how sort of come and I give in to the social force.
When we the term that's going to be used so much in the next 2 days is Befindlichkeit, which is about that sense that we have, our bodily felt sense of something. And Heidegger's notion is that bodily sense is telling us something about the world. In the sense we are open to the world, and we are registering stuff, which is in a sense the world. And he also says you can never get behind it, you can never know all about it. But however, in a sense, it's what you're talking about, phenomenologically, in other words, in your own experience, you were registering something. And you're registering something about him, something about what other people were saying, the tension between what they're saying and your own experience. So, in that sense, it's not just, you can understand it's not just purely subjective. There is something there. Which is why, if you see about this being open to the world, it's my experience, but his whole point is we're in the world, and therefore the world is in us. So there is, he is wanting to get away from this separation between self and other. So in a way, you could say there's something about you and him there, in this part, that you were feeling it.
And it makes me think about those choices, and the choice that I made to go along with the don't talk about work and what's going on for you. It felt as if that choice then, it didn't sit comfortably with me afterwards, and it's sort of challenging my values. So what would I do if it happened next time around? Feels like it's gone to the the core of things in some sense.
So again, I'm not sure if this is entirely right, but in a sense, if you're coaching someone, and phenomenologically, you're working with exactly that felt sense, if you like, that of there is something here, and I'm feeling restrained, constrained to speak about it. It's in the room. It's here. So I think that the example you give is good in this.
Is it in any sense does it have a collective element to it?
Very much so. Well, when I say it, what I was thinking about, and we'll come to this, is that sense of what's present. I met a fellow devotee of Heidegger in Ireland in doing one of these courses, and his example was the mood you get in organisations and in teams. And he was saying that you just walk into a place and you can feel the mood. You can feel the mood here, and it colours everything. So again, when we come to this notion, we'll talk about this Befindlichkeit, this mood. It's a form of knowing, but it also it colours the world in a sense. It organises everything about the context in a way, and it isn't just personal. I mean, because Heidegger's about being in the world, everything that he's talking about is both us and the world, which is the shift that out from seeing us as encapsulated beings where all our personal sense or our feelings are just our own and often not to be trusted, in fact.
And there's a limiting factor to the world, isn't there? Because my world is different to your world, is different to Dawn's world, and I think that, Dawn, was the point you were making, isn't it? Is you can read a paragraph and the way it impacts on you will depend on the totality of your world as you have experienced it up until that point in your life. And it may be affected by the kind of social elements of that world or the cultures that you've been experienced to. But our worlds are very different.
Well, let me...
Even though we're all of the world, our own world, my bigger world, is very different to your bigger world than the one that we just sit and live in.
Let me put it this way. I think from this perspective, we live in a shared world, which is the culture. Okay, we share a culture, and our meanings are generated in that culture. They're not all personally generated. What on the end of my foot is a shoe, and everybody knows that's a shoe. I haven't kind of created that as my own personal head. It's a shared notion. So it's the culture that sets that gives you the shared meaning, but we each have our own history in it. We each, and again, which a word we'll come to. I think this is the way I like to put it: is we each get tuned and attuned, like a tuning fork. We'll resonate to certain things in a situation. We each become attuned to life in different ways, and we take that attunement into situations. So, although we live in a shared world, each of us, as we walk into here, have got a different, our own history, which tunes us in a different way to the world we're in. So, and that attunement means it's not just personal. I was thinking of somebody who was just she just expected the world to be a threatening place, and really anxious in that, and ready to be attacked. And in a sense, she wasn't just wrong, because there was elements in any situation where there's possibilities of threat and opportunities to be anxious. And people do say stuff that can be heard different ways. And there's often different intentions in what people say. So it's almost like the way she was gathered all that up. So it wasn't like in the usual psychology we talk about projection. It's something in me that I project out into the world. The notion of attunement is different. There is what was being picked up is in the world, but the person's become attuned through their living, if you like, to that particular take. So in terms of we can all read something in our own way. I think what I would want to resist from this perspective is it's just a personal reading, and anybody could read it in any way they wish because it's just individual. So I would say we would read stuff from our own attunement to it, which is our own, not the knowledge we bring into it, our own experience we bring into it. It's almost like how we've differentiated ourselves within a culture, rather than being kind of an encapsulated being who then, bumps into other people and bumps into a culture.
Thinking of your shoe, Jeff, I can see that's a shoe, but I have no understanding of how comfortable that may be for you because it's not on your foot. Yours. But I think when you first bought that shoe, it's leather, whether it's made of, and then sort of become moulded to your feet. You've impacted on that shoe as well.
Absolutely.
So
but the
shoe
shoe,
had an impact on it.
and the shoe was made by shoe manufacturers who know all about shoes, and they know people are going to buy them, and they know all about leather, and they know about how to make them, and they know about fashion. So there's a whole world of meaning and skill that's gone into the making of this, which is communal.
It's also an appropriate size for you.
Yeah.
It's the
That's right.
measure
That's right.
size feet, so
That's right.
it's appropriate to you.
That's right. So that's the context, and I mean it's quite a good example really, because yes, and as I put my foot in, I shape it in different ways. So in Heidegger, it is the coming together of both of those things. And if you think about people in organisations, the organisation pre-exists them, it has its own culture, and we find our way into it, and then we have to shape ourselves. We're shaped by it, and we do some shaping of it. It's holding both of those. Let me. I'll just say a bit more about him. So he's regarded by many as the most important philosopher of the last century, and there's no doubt that he has profoundly shifted loads of social thought in ways I won't go into now. And being in time, which I've got it, I'll bring it in tomorrow, and you can just look at it. And it's often seen by many people as the most important philosophical text of the last century. There is this thing which is about in 1933 he joined the Nazi Party and really for a year was kind of their tool, I think, their spokesperson in this particular area around universities. So that's a real shameful period, and people have really tried to make sense of, well, what's that about? Is it inherent in his philosophy, or is it separable? Clearly, I think I wouldn't be here if I thought it wasn't, but it's still something to be to try and make sense of. There's lots of different explanations been given, sort of personal, social, political, philosophical. It'd be interesting to come back to it. Important to, I think. I think the question that keeps coming back to me as I listen to stuff is exactly going back to our earlier point, that there is no morality in this. If you believe that culture, we're all part of a culture, and that there are many, many different cultures, then how do you ground values, morality, and so forth? Which is a really critical question. And it's one that concerns me, because I think, especially when we get into the existential side of it, it's all about how am I to live my life and if you haven't got the grounds for it, what's the difference between what I know Hitler did, and Mandela did. What's the difference? How can you? And so that is a real concern in this. It makes it very challenging, really.
It's just interesting, Jeff. I did some. This is all coming back, but I did some philosophy when I was as an undergraduate at university, and almost to a person, our lecturers had almost not dismissed Heidegger. That wasn't because it was this thing about the end of objectivity, subjectivity within Kant was. It was seen as extremely powerful, but it was almost as if when I was doing this in the sort of the late 70s, I guess, it'd been written off.
That's right.
Because of like it happened with a couple of big scientists, and we went and worked with the Nazis as well. It was almost as if an analysis about his continuing legacy was undermined because of what he'd done. And it's just interesting listening to you, I think, and thinking, actually, you can go through that. There's, it isn't a comfortable path, but actually, if you can still see what's behind all of that and get that, I just remember this being. It was almost like, once you'd studied Heidegger, it was like, not very merry.
Well,
we all left off to the camp.
As we'll see, you can read him as the end of reason. You see, once you take the usual objectivity, and you bring in the fact that, it's in modern physics now. I mean, all the quantum physics stuff says you can't take the experimenter out of the experiment. So in physics, it's the same kind of stuff. But when he was writing it was he was in a very different tradition to the usual philosophical one. And he was written off as sort of obscurantist, end of reason, and of course doing what he did with the Nazi Party just confirms all that. So
that's a good question.
Yeah.
A lot of what you described so far with the example of sharing things remind me of social constructionism.
Yes.
I'm trying to, I suppose in my mind I'm trying to unravel, is there a strong distinction between Heidegger's philosophy and social constructionism?
I would say social constructionism, which I don't know, has anyone got that? It's basically that there is no, that ideas are socially constructed rather than rooted in objectivity, and that they come through the kind of activity that we're engaged in. It's absolutely from the Heidegger tradition. So Heidegger lays the groundwork for which social constructionism then comes.
And does it still have the relationship to the kind of the reality, as it were?
In social constructionism?
Yeah.
Well, it's they're massive questions because people start to pull and tug at it in its own way. But social constructionism has that same concern at the end of the day is, well, how can we be sure? How can we really know? Is this just storytelling? So it's that same concern that goes right through it like a stick of rock, really. So Heidegger's concern was, throughout his life, was this notion of what is being. A very simple question, what do we mean by being? I'm not even going to start to get into that question, but the thing that was most important to him was that he looked at the Western tradition, which separates subjective and objective, the subject and the object, and says this, he wants to overcome this split. He says this is a split that is rooted in Western philosophy as most clearly expressed by Descartes, who apparently was, what was he now, you were saying? Verse from...
René Descartes was a drunken fart.
Yeah. Wasn't it, I drink, therefore I am?
Oh, yeah.
Well, so again, this might sound like it's going into abstractness, but actually it's fundamental stuff. I used to think that 10 minutes of good philosophy was worth years of just ploughing away at something, because you get hold of what the root of stuff is. So the root of so much of nearly all psychology, for example, is based in the stuff from Descartes. And so Descartes' famous expressions, I think, therefore I am. Therefore, I put therefore. And what he tried to do, Descartes, he was wanting the grounds of secure knowledge. He was coming from the times of when, it was the religious knowledge that said such is so, the papal edict or whatever, papal edict. So he's saying, well, what's the grounds of secure knowledge? So he sort of secreted him. This isn't actually Descartes, but he kind of went into his. It's called The Philosopher by some well-known painter. He went into his study, shut the blinds, turned, just had. So he removed himself from the world as much as he could, and imagined that there was something that he might be mad, or he might be dreaming, or there might be a wicked demon trying to deceive him, and said, what are the grounds of secure knowledge? And he kind of whittled away at everything. He got to the state of saying, well, I can't trust my senses. We all know that they deceive us. You stick a stick in the water and you see it kind of go at a funny angle. There's all the optical illusions. I might be dreaming anyway. So he got to the stage of saying, the only thing that I can absolutely be sure of is I am thinking. That no one can deceive me. I'm here doing it. I might be doing it in a dream, but I am thinking. So he said the only grounds for secure knowledge was, I think, therefore I am. And the impact of that, if you notice, to do it, he'd withdrawn himself from the world. He took himself away from everything. He abstracted himself from everything. He's just there in a darkened room. He doesn't want to... And so what he says is, I can't trust there's a real world out there. So thinking and the real world are separate. He says, he says, I can't trust that I have a body. Although he then comes up with the notion that you can understand the body as like a machine. Feelings are, this is the way it's got to, feelings are private affairs and they're not to be trusted. They fool us, if you want to know what truth is, objectivity is, you have to put aside all these feelings, all these passions that are going to lead us astray. And he said, in terms of the world, well, I know I have experienced stuff, but it's actually me that gives the meanings to all this. So it's not that there's a real world out there. Well, I can't know if there's a real world, but I have sensations. But it's I that give meaning to this. Which is a bit the same sort of stuff we've been saying about, if I read a book and it's my meaning, isn't it? And someone else can see it and read completely different stuff into it. This model is absolutely fundamental to every way that we think and all the stuff we do. The subjective and objective. It's just become absolutely the way we view everything. And sort of psychology is based in it. So psychology is like, if you think of CBT nowadays, cognitive behavioural therapy, they say things like, it's the beliefs that matter. Have you come across it? Anything about CBT? They say, it's not what happened, it's what you think about it. And if you think about it differently, the world will be different. So it's exactly this stuff. That the world is the meaning I give to my sensations. So the whole Cartesian, as it's called, the whole Cartesian approach is to think that the only thing that really matters is what goes on between your ears, the thinking, and to treat the body as a separate. The thing was like a machine there, but it still has that sense of something separate. The mind-body split and all the rest of it.
And is that to do with the sort of objectification of everything? So scientific objectification.
Well, yeah. So you take all subjectivity out of the world, and you say all subjectivity is in here, and the world is an objective place that's got nothing to do with subjectivity. There's nothing of me in there. And in the sense, the big question then comes: well, how can you know what's there? How can you trust it? And the whole thing about objectivity and scientific method has been to try and find a method that's going to make sure that you're that there's truth in what you're talking about.
If you just go back to what you're saying about CBT, if you think about something differently, well, I'm just thinking about the world is the meaning I give to my sensations. I'm thinking about the Gestalt stuff there, where you probably say, well, what you're aware of, what you feel. So if you then say to somebody, well, just try to think about it differently. Just really sure I'm convinced that works for me.
If you just stick with CBT for a minute, so the notion there is that you have to change the way that you think about something. You change your beliefs. So if you see somebody, if you're frightened of a situation, then the notion is that it's the beliefs you have about it that are creating the feelings. So if you change the beliefs, it doesn't always work, of course. But that's if you go along with Heidegger, that's no surprise. Gestalt is actually rooted in this tradition.
Would that be acting?
Say again.
The changing the way you, that scenario of being frightened. I'm trying to think I'm not frightened. Project a different image of response that shows them.
Would that
thinking of a dog, if we say just walk straight past your friend, just walk straight past it, don't look at it,
So if you change the beliefs, then you can change the way you go about doing stuff. How are you going for attention here? This is heavy duty stuff in a way. Do you need a break or?
It's 5 to.
Yeah. I just wasn't. Do you need a break? Yeah. Okay.
Before we break, did you say using like Gestalt is rooted in this stuff?
It is, yeah.
Could you say
well, because Gestalt is very much, if you think about it, it's rooted in the individual's. Again, I'll talk about this when we get to phenomenology. It's the whole cycle of experience is rooted in an individual's personal needs, which organise their perception. It's like a need arises in you. It might be to have a break, and that starts to organise what's going on for you, and then it leads to your actions. And then once you've had a break, then that need subsides, and another one emerges. So when we talk about the difference between this and Gestalt, it will be exploring that difference.
I just like to irritate you by saying, what about field theory in Gestalt would actually be bringing in context?
Well, there is field theory, but I think it's it's almost like you can ride two different horses. You can ride the horse of it's about the real world, isn't it? But I think that is jumping over something that they're not noticing, which is that actually the most of it's saying it's rooted in our needs, and the field of perception will be rooted in our needs. So, the field here for me might be, well, I know what it is. It's something like I think we need to be breaking, actually. But I can feel it, and that's organising how I'm listening, how I'm responding. So I think that because in a sense you need to do it to get by in the real world, the philosophical, or the root basis gets forgotten about, and people then take up the other position as if it was in. So Gestalt will talk about field as if it's about the organisation and its structure and its impact, but I think they've jumped over something without properly attending to it.
Sorry, I think I've just got lost on that one, so I just want to check that my understanding.
Yeah, do.
So, are we saying that Gestalt is based in this sort of Cartesian?
Yes, I am.
Right. Okay. Well, that's going to be interesting later on then.
Yeah. Okay. Let's hold it as a question, and because we're going to do phenomenology later, and that's where the rubber hits the road in terms of the different approaches. All right, should we have 20 minutes?